Welcome everyone to our second, I'm calling these episodes in our series called Let's Unpack That. My name is Verdeja-Woodson. I am the host of this webinar series, but also the founder and CEO of Brave Trainings LLC. I started this particular series as a podcast originally a couple of years ago, and due to recent events decided, you know what, I need an outlet, and I also want to create space for other voices to be heard as well. And so picked it back up in webinar form to unpack a bunch of topics that a lot of people keep texting me and emailing me questions about. Before we get started, I do want to note, even though the captioning is not working, I'm going to have to call them again. Our captioning was sponsored by Dr. Brandon Barilli, who facilitates workshops on gender inclusivity and personal empowerment, and Queerly Empowered, which is a niche book and gift store sharing queer literature and merchandise, which focuses on empowering queer voices, including your own. And thank you for sponsoring our closed caption. You can find them at brandonbarilli.com and queerlyempowered.com. You can also follow them on Instagram at Dr. Brandon Barilli and at Queerly Empowered. And I'll put that up in the YouTube when this particular video gets posted. I want to dive right in and recognizing that we only have an hour and there's so much to talk about. So one, I want to thank our panelists for being here. I want to give you about 30 seconds to share your name, your affirming pronouns with us, and then we'll get started with our first question. I'm going to start with Candace.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Candace Edwards. I'm an artist, engineer, and QTPOC event-based curator. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Jillian?
Hi, I'm Jillian Glasgow. I am an actor and a writer, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Gabrielle?
All right, hey everyone, my name is Gabby Royal. Pronouns are she, her. I am a diversity, inclusion, equity strategist and founder of Inclusion First Consulting LLC. Thanks so much for having us, Cornell.
Awesome. And Nicole?
Hi everyone, my name is Nicole LaFave. I'm based in Ithaca, New York. I am Assistant Director of Diversity Alumni Programs at Cornell University, also a local activist.
Awesome.
Thank you, Cornell.
Yes, thank you. And my affirming pronouns are he, him, his, himself. So thank you. So the first question I wanted to ask is really like a check-in question to sort of, see where people are. And the question is, what has been going through your mind as you witness what is happening in our country right now? What emotions come up for you? What's going through your own thoughts as you're seeing what's happening and how it's being played out in the media, et cetera? And anyone, popcorn style, anyone can go.
I can start, Cornell. Obviously this is a timely and relevant discussion for all of us. I think folks that are D&I strategists, practitioners, advisors for companies or within their own right, I think that it's a really interesting time to spark action and change within our organizations. But at the same time, for me personally, it is very triggering. It's like you have to strike a balance between trying to check your wellness and your health along the way, like as you're navigating your own identities during all of the conditions that we're plagued with. And then at the same time, return to your day job and do that work effectively too. So you're doing a lot of educating, but you're also in this unique position where you're having to navigate trauma, with regard to the communities that we're part of.
Absolutely. Other folks?
I'm tired, but at the same time, I feel very hopeful. So there's just like a lot of energy, and I kind of filter it in different ways. Like Gabrielle was saying, we have to process all this as Black folks, as queer folks, as femmes, as women, and then we also have to show up professionally and do our jobs effectively. And for me, that has looked like being like, I'm not coming into work today. Have you looked at anything on TV? Like I'm clocking out, charge that to the game. I'm Black, so
Yeah. Nicole, Jillian, anything you want to add with where you are right now?
It's just an undeniable repetition of history, or rather things that have never stopped. And I think it's just an ongoing reminder of the anti-Blackness in our country, how it is rampant, and how there is the ongoing conversation about whether or not Black people are to be allowed to live, to be safe, to be heard, to be seen, and not demonized and criminalized. So I'm exhausted. I am mad because these conversations just really come down to, we still as a nation have not decided, well, certain folks have not decided that we have a right to be here. And so all this means to me is that the fight is incessant, and it is something that we can't stop and never be complacent about, regardless of how many seeming levels of acceptance or success or monetary gain we have oftentimes, I think, been distracted by. So yeah, I'm just angry a lot. Yeah.
I want to welcome Araya Lester, the fabulous Araya Lester, who I only just met through a friend of mine. Thanks so much for being here. I was telling you.
Hello. Yes, I'm sorry. In the calendar invite, there was a Google Meet link, and that's where I was sitting at for like the longest time until I went back into my email, and then I clicked the link that was in the email, and now I'm here.
Gotcha. You're here. You're here.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for being here. We're just on our first question. I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself
Okay.
with his name and affirming pronouns, and then we're answering the question, where are you right now in terms of how you're responding to everything we're witnessing in the country right now?
Well, my name is Araya Lester. I'm the Deputy Director of the Transgender Strategy Center. Pronouns she, her, hers, but I prefer Araya, Arayas, say my name as much as possible. And as far as like where I'm at, of course it's tiring, just reiterating everything that has been reiterated for decades upon decades, and for myself and other people like me years and years, but also hopeful. I feel like that there's a space now to really get the broadest audience as possible. So I'm trying to dwell in hope at the moment.
Absolutely. And Nicole, how about you?
I think what everyone else has said has really resonated with me, especially Gabrielle, in terms of talking about mental wellness and taking time to take a step back and take care of myself. I have 3 kids, so spending time at work doing diversity and inclusion work, doing that work in the community outside of my work hours, and then also trying to encourage joy for my kids, really important for me. So I've really been trying to practice saying no and decentering myself and believing that other people in the community will show up, and I don't need to be part of everything. And it's okay for me not to go to a protest because I want to take my kids to swim because that makes them happy. So I'm trying to find happiness and celebrating the wins when we have them, because I'm not as hopeful as everyone else is. So I'm really just trying to find joy for my kids and trying to stay hopeful for them, because without joy and hope, I think we all perish and die. So I've been feeling unwell, and I think that's why I've been taking some step backs and just spending time with my kids when I can, and surrounding myself with people that do feel hopeful, to remind me that the journey is really long. So we have to keep fighting, but also find joy when we can.
Absolutely. And I just want to validate what you just said so much, and thank you even more so for saying yes to this and being here. I'm even more appreciative of your time and the energy you're putting into even being on this panel right now. So thank you. I think a couple of you mentioned hopeful, and this was not one of the questions, so forgive me, but you mentioned this hopeful, and I'm kind of with Nicole. I have had a hard time finding the hope. I feel like, and I think Jillian, you also alluded to this as well, that companies have been giving us Juneteenth off, and everyone's celebrating. I'm just like, so that's breadcrumbs, right? Like, that's not the pie I'm actually looking for. And so how do you find the hope in sort of how we've been able to move the needle? Where does that hope come from? And what advice would you give for other folks who are kind of where Nicole and I are with trying to find the hope in all of this mess?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. It is, you know, it brings you down, and for a while, you know, it was like, oh, here we go again, type of thing. But where my hope came from is seeing higher visibility of specifically Black trans stories and narratives, and leaders having greater platforms than they ever had before in order to spread those messages. And that's where my hope is. My hope is not in society at large, or you know, for the general public, but the empowerment that I see coming from my peers in within this space right now, you know, and taking whatever little pieces that they can grab onto, those little pieces of straws to spin into a type of gold. If you know the Mother Goose reference, then that's where my hope lies in. You know, it lies with me and others like me, and the perseverance. I think not really the resiliency, because I don't really believe in resilience. It's just perseverance. It's just pushing through from one moment, one stumbling block, one barrier to the next, and that's where I'm finding my hope in.
Yeah, thank you for that. Other folks?
Um, oh no, go for it.
Okay. So just echoing what Araya said, I want to clarify that my hope isn't coming from society at large. That would be disastrous. But my hope has been coming from just the community that I've seen, like, so Black queer folks, really, truly, like, that's where the center of my hope has been, and then reconnecting with myself and my history, and reflecting on the history. Like, we've been set up to step into this position, right? We can step into our power, right? And if we look back onto what, you know, our ancestors have gone through, things like that, like, we've overcame these other things because of our community, not in spite of society at large. So in that space, I find comfort, and I also feel hopeful, because I personally feel powerful. Like, I personally feel like things are changing in a way that I can also influence, but that hope is more so for the people that I'm building with. That's more so for my loved ones, my friends, my family. But that's where it's coming from. Not, you know, we're here, we've arrived.
Right. Gabrielle, you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that for me, something that's unique is seeing this movement sustained, right? And I think that what we're seeing is oftentimes we're expected, even in the workplace, to take on the burden of D&I work, even if it isn't work that you're engaged in professionally. When things like this happen, you're seeing a lot of asks from leaders for folks of color to step up and to have a view or a perspective or offer some guidance on what to do. But what we're seeing now is a level of accountability, and we'll get to performative allyship later. I know that's a teaser, but we're seeing that level of accountability across communities that may not hold identities that we hold, and it's a sustained movement. And they're saying, this actually impacts us too, and it's giving them pause. And from that lens, I think that we're going to see opportunities to really move the needle in a positive way and create positive social change for Black people and people of color within the community at a corporate level and beyond. So for those reasons alone, with folks saying, I'm holding myself accountable and actually I'm seeing the impact, whether it's performative or not, is creating some momentum.
Gotcha. You bring up, so, you know, the real bulk of these conversations was my own frustration with what I noticed within the Black community and the Black activism, Black Lives Matter, was the erasure of trans people from the conversation, the erasure of Black women from the conversation, you know, and I wanted to really bring particularly a group of Black women together to talk about, from your perspective, and your identity as a woman of color, what is that about? What's the history that is connected to the relationship between the Black community and the queer community, trans community? Why is it so hard for our community to say all of our voices and to think very intersectional in our activism? Araya's got an answer.
Yes, yes. This is something I've been speaking on a lot lately, and what I call it is the scarcity of scarcity myth. And so, the establishments that have oppressed us for so many years have created a myth to where there's only a limited amount of resources, there's a limited amount of visibility, there's a limited amount of platforms that are available to oppressed peoples. And so we kind of feed into that cycle to where then we see a lot of infighting, we see a lot of arguments happening within within the trans community, within the Black community, within the LGBTQ plus community, of people fighting for space and fighting for platforms when we're fighting for a fraction that does not really exist, because what we need to do is pool our power, pool our pressure to actually change the myth of that scarcity and have it actually be to where, no, there's enough room for all of us. White people just have to move out and give us that room. And when we look at an equitable way of liberation, that's what it means. When we look at equity and we look at our liberation as Black peoples and all of our intersections, we understand that what it takes is everybody having that piece of the pie that they need in order to get their demands met and make actions. So, yeah.
Nicole, you look like you had a deep thought that you wanted to add in there. Yeah.
It really stood out to me when Araya said equitable liberty. So for me, I was like, oof.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about liberty, are we thinking about equity? So I was unpacking that in my head in terms of how do we talk about equitable liberty. I think it's also important to acknowledge how much homophobia is within the Black community, whether that's related to religion or not, but I think there is a huge amount of homophobia within the Black community. And I think that's most definitely tied to us being able to uplift the conversation about Black lives, including all lives. If we're not looking at folks as part of Black folks that are part of the LGBTQ community as a humane group of people, then we're not doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have to look at how we oppress each other just as much as we're looking at how white folks oppress us. So I don't think that we're having that conversation right now because it's us versus them, but the us doesn't encompass all of us. So I think we have to start breaking that down.
Yeah.
Can I add to that just very quickly?
I would say,
No,
I would say that a lot of what all this ties into is that many of us in the Black community are still very committed to assimilation. So whether we are conscious of it or not, when we are invested in the capitalistic institutions that enforce hyper cis dominant culture, masculinity, then when we're still looking at that as our paradigm for success, stability, education, wealth, all of that, we inherently believe that as close as we can get to that, then we're safer, then we can do it. And that's when we start deciding who doesn't get to come, because we're actually still trying to get the assimilation approval. We still need to be validated by the people that are still oppressing us. So we start saying now women can't really come, queer people can't really come, because we think that's a representation of ourselves that are too vulnerable, that are too outside of the box, that will cost us too much, still trying to fit in their box that, as Araya has said, that little sliver isn't even there. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to assimilate to something while diluting our own greatness and our own textures and our own colors. And it's not that it doesn't come from a real place. We do understand that being authentic is not something that has been a luxury for us. It's always it still costs us something. And unfortunately, many people are not willing to pay the price for what it means to not assimilate.
you bring up really two really important points to me. One on this point of respectability politics, right? Like that we're just like you, like, and every movement has done it, right? The LGBTQIA plus community did it when they were trying to show that, you know, the straight people, that we were just like them, right? Black people do it when we, you know, and are seeking to be closer to whiteness. And like, that's white supremacy, right? The idea that the closer you are to this image of what it means to be white and also American, like we got to tie that together as well. And that's the true fight. And I had to really realize for myself that not every Black person or every person is actually seeking liberation. They're just seeking their seat at the table of, at the white table, right? Which is not liberation. It's just being a part of a system that devalues you and was never built for you in the first place. Gabrielle, you wanted to add something, and I.
Oh, I mean, Jillian, that was a complete mic drop.
Yes,
kind of
it really was.
So that's very hard to follow. But all I was going to say really is that if we're not keeping conversations intersectional, then the movement is suffering. And we deserve more than to just take breadcrumbs, right? So I think the point that you're making is really detaching from those problematic attachments that we have to whiteness, institutionalized versions of what have become, you know, racism in all of its many forms. So we need to break away from that and keep the conversations intersectional for all the communities that are represented within the Black community.
Right.
And Nicole, I think that you made that point of religion, and that's what brings us all in. Like we look at the ancient African traditions, you know, and we look at the androgyny that we had in our deities, and the heightened and elevated respect that we had for different for genders outside of the binary type of thing. And it was colonialization, and you know, and white people coming in with their ideals that actually created that system that Gillian started talking about, you know, that cis white male system. And what's the complete opposite of cis white heterosexual male is a Black transgender women, and that's why we're still dying.
I don't even know what to say. Y'all just, I knew this was going to be, this is it. So I don't even know how to pivot from that. I want to draw some attention to what Gabrielle mentioned earlier around performative allyship. And this was a question that has come up a lot. And I want to remind our folks who are watching, please put your questions in the Q&A box, and I want to try and get to them before we end. But a lot of companies, particularly in June, love changing their logos to the, you know, LGBTQ pride flag. A lot of companies are coming out with their anti-racism statements, and here's what we're doing, and here's the numbers that we're committing to. And a lot of people are like, right? Like, we're like, okay, right? No one's really, I don't think, that excited about that. What is it? What is the skepticism behind Black people in particular, and trans people, queer people, when we see those statements?
I don't buy it.
Yep, fear. No, I was going to say the same thing, fear. Like right now, like we know how trends move, right? And we know the profits that come out of trends. And what we're seeing here is organizations and companies that just don't want to look bad because of call out culture, and having their profit margins decrease because of a certain stance that they have in their products or their services. And so you get this blanketed kind of Band-Aid thing when it comes to the Black Lives Matter, or let's put our logo all in the pride flag colors, you know, like type of thing. But if I'm not seeing those same individuals within your board, within your high executive management, within the people who are actually making the decisions for your products and your services, and what that looks like and how it actually is crafted to meet certain populations, I'm not buying it either. Go ahead, Candace.
Anyone else want
I
to
mean, that part. So just to add on to what Mariah said, I saw the other day, and to go back to your question too, Cornell, I was looking the other day on the Vanguard site. And so for those who don't know, Vanguard is like one of the largest like mutual funds, financial institutions. If you have like a 401k or a 403b, you're probably running some money through Vanguard. And so I saw their like diversity statement, we respect all lives, And, you know, I'm a finance person. So I was like, okay, let me dig into this a bit. But Vanguard is one of like the largest holders of the CCA, which is a real estate company that owns prisons, right? And they build all these properties, then they bundle it into the offerings that they're selling to other folks, right? But so y'all are directly benefiting from the imprisonment, the brutality, the violence, the surveillance against Black bodies, particularly Black, queer, femme bodies. But y'all appreciate diversity. Like, make it make sense. Make it make sense.
So Candace, to go off of that, what do you think that's about? Why is it that in one breath we have this, because I have a theory, and I think that this problem is much more insidious than we even think it is. I really think that people who make these decisions to write these statements and let's say what we got to say, and then at the same hand, invest in these private prisons, literally don't see the connection. Am I making an excuse? Do you think I'm making an excuse, or do you?
They know. Yeah. And that's also where I am in 2020, just so everyone is clear. Everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
This whole idea that we didn't know it was so bad, we didn't understand what we were doing, we didn't know Black people were, actually you did. And they always know. And the reason we know that they know is because the systems still work. None of this happens by accident. And even when it comes to someone who is not a part of a private-owned prison, just your friend Rachel that you went to high school with who swears that she didn't know she was racist, it's like, it's actually against humanity to deny people rights and to treat them differently or badly, right? It's against humanity. So it's like, even if you don't understand the why of why certain things always seem to happen to Black people or like gay people, what you do know is that you're supposed to marginalize them. You do know you're supposed to treat them differently. And you do know that when bad things happen to them, you're supposed to just shrug it off. Right. So it's like, everyone has accepted that Black people are inherently supposed to be criminal. Everyone has accepted it. Yeah. And they act on it. They carry it out in their families, in their jobs, in their homes, in the streets. And certainly the people at Vanguard know exactly what they're doing. So I'm just saying, personally, I'm no longer having conversations about what people don't know.
The same people who don't know are those people who hold their purses when we walk by.
That's what I'm saying. Holding your purse when a Black man walks by is not an unknowing. Yeah, that's a knowing.
Absolutely.
So
like the woman with Christian Cooper, she knew what she was doing when she called the cops. She knew when she was threatening. She knew what that meant and what that represented, right? Absolutely. Just so you know, I knew the answer to that question. I wanted to throw it out there, so y'all know. That's why y'all look at me like, why is he asking this question? Trust me, I know. I'm a facilitator now. Here's another question I really want to jump into. So there's been a lot of conversation around this cancel culture, right? That every time we find out that some new company is investing in prisons, or, their entire board is white, their entire C-suite is white, but yet you're out here, saying how you care about Black lives, that, we jump into this, like, you're canceled, boycott them. And there's a lot of criticism of this cancel culture. What are your thoughts on that? What are the benefits, the detriments to the movement of this cancel culture? Is it helping? Is it not? What are your general thoughts there? Should we be saying no shopping at these companies?
I think my first thought is Black folks are tired of meeting people where they're at. I feel like that is the lingo in diversity and inclusion work, whether we're talking about higher education, whether we're talking about grassroots organizing. We're continuously telling Black people to meet white people where they're at. We've been doing that for 400 years, and we're tired of that. So for me, with cancel culture, when I'm done with you, because I'm not able to spend time with my kids or things that I love to do because I have to explain oppression to a white person who created it. Like, no, nobody has time for that. Do the work. Just the way that all of us are doing that work, we're living the work, like, do the work on your own, or you get canceled.
Yeah. Jillian?
And I think I completely agree with what Nicole said. Like, I'm not meeting anyone where they are. There's Google, leave me alone. There are books. But I think that you have to draw a distinction in terms of like who you're canceling. Like, I have no problem canceling a corporation or a public figure or something like that. But when it's folks who are within our community, the communities that we're in, when we're talking about Black folks or or queer folks or people like that we identify and we are trying to build with, then we might have a little bit more latitude, depending on who it is, if you have the energy. But I know for me, I have much more space and compassion for Black folks who need to, or especially like older generation folks who like, okay, like I need to have this conversation with you. Maybe you're a cousin of mine or a family member who I have said I have the energy to have this kind of conversation with. That's different from just like some random white person who is sapping my energy, doing the work that they could easily do by typing on their keyboard on the internet.
Other folks?
I think it's also important to think about folks' capacity. So in terms of canceling someone, do you feel that they have the capacity to grow and evolve? Do they want to do the work, or are they just putting on a facade so you think they're woken down? I think folks who actually, I think we have to acknowledge that this country is very racially, socioeconomically segregated. So in terms of thinking about most of us on this call that went to Ithaca College together, I had so many racist things that were said to me. I will also say that those comments came from folks that were from all white towns where I was the only Black person they had ever talked to in real life. So in terms of thinking about who to cancel, like Candace was saying, I think on a personal level for me, it's me thinking about that individual and if they have the capacity to grow, or if they're just wanting to zap my energy to make themselves feel guilt, of their guilt.
And for me, you know, when I look at the trans community, I think that's a complex question. Because when you really look at it, when it comes to trans people, we should cancel all of it, even the Black people, the Black companies, you know, like they're all implicit in the violence that Black trans people, you know, actually encounter on day-to-day lives. But there is a kind of a culture around a call out and call in, you know, being that I'm gonna call you out, I'm gonna show you exactly why you're wrong because of this, and this. But then I'm also gonna tell you how I can call you in and like maybe if I have the energy, you know, and if you're paying me, then I can let you know, like what you can do, who you can call, you know, in order to set up what you need to set up. But then it does get complex when we decide on who, you know, we actually want to call in besides calling out. And I can also call you out, call you in, and still cancel you, you know, anyway, because like it was said, if you don't already know the basics, then that means your whole structure is built off of oppression anyway, you know, and you just tear it all down and you're going to have to build it back up or let somebody else build it up or retire and go on your merry racist way.
Yeah, you know, this question is something that's really important to me because I think that the average person does not recognize the politics that play in where we spend our dollar, right? And how much you actually can hurt a corporation when you choose, when collectively we choose to say that if you do not truly authentically value us, but beyond the Black History Month and the Pride and this one little statement you've made, then you haven't earned the right to have my dollar, and that our dollar has power. Not that I'm a fan of Killer Mike, but he has an episode in a show that he used to do where he talked about how long it takes for the Black dollar to leave the Black community, right? And so we give our money away to these white and non-Black organizations that actually don't see us. And what happens when we say, you know what, so since you don't value us, we're gonna spend our money elsewhere? Is that possible? Is like, how do we move towards that, and particularly as a, you know, for folks who are Black and trans, where every organization will be canceled? How do we begin to use our economic power to be able to show them that we're not playing, that this is serious?
Well, for Black and trans people, what we've been doing is just building on our own, you know, building our own organizations, our own companies, placing ourselves in leadership positions where we can make decisions. Because like you said, we currently, like when we look at the state of things, we can't depend on anybody really except for ourselves. And so it's creating new avenues for yourself is where I have the most trust in. So there's I'm having getting some feedback there, but there is opportunities for us to maybe engage in organizations and companies who already have the basics. You know, you already know about pronouns, you know, already know about neutrality and respect and gender affirming services and that type of thing, and we're in your organization somewhat spotted throughout, you know, to try to create something beyond the forest bias, because we know that we're such a small minority that it's just going to be hard to get every product and service from us, because we're still we're dwindling, and because of us dying, and you know, we don't have as much access as other people.
Yeah. Araya, you really schooled me on something just now, just like even thinking about our activism looking the same, and how not every group is able to do what I might be able to do. Like, that's something that I had not thought of, and so I appreciate you bringing that to the table and like naming that. Other folks, responses to that question?
I'd be happy to respond.
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
it was just,
Which one?
We use our economic power to, you know, really show these businesses, these companies, that we're not playing, and that, you know, we want actual real change. Gabby, did you want
I do just think, and just on like a personal level in our mindset of consumers, is that we have to remember how much power we do have as consumers. And then we also have to start becoming okay with not just doing the same things we've always done. I think habits and just baseline levels of comfortability is what keeps us from exploring other options or believing and investing in our own. Because it's like, of course, we all know we could like run to Walmart and like get probably whatever we need 99% of the time. And there just has to come a point when it's just like, people can even think that like Walmart doesn't have to be the only option. And again, as Araya said, that, you know, I live in New York City. I can easily get everything I need all the time without walking into a major chain. And that is just the privilege of living in New York City proper, Harlem, you know. So, you know, I'm gonna have access to private owned mom and pops, people on the street. I know it's easier said than done, but I also just don't think that we're even comfortable with the idea of isolating ourselves away from the bigger change. Because for a lot of people, it's just comforting, it's fast, it's easy, and it makes our, you know, they're flagpoles in our life. But I think that that's a part of the rewiring of getting away from a lot of assimilated ideas, or the notions that if it's not coming from a big air-conditioned store or a white person, that it's not, as it doesn't have the same value. And that's just false. And so there's a rewiring in our value system that has to happen.
We have to look at affordability too, you know, because those structures have been built for so long, then those bigger corporations are able to give you that product at a price with you, you know, coming from an impoverished group, you know, like you said, just, or you're in a small rural, you know, southern town where, you know, the only things is the mom and pops are all white southern people anyway, you know, and you can only go to a Walmart or a Kmart or that type of thing. And so we have to look at, you know, I think it kind of feeds into the poverty as well, and looking at what is accessible to people at a poverty level, because a lot of us have accessibility that comes only with privilege.
Yes, yeah.
You are 100% correct. And but I even look at something like Corona, which has changed everybody's lives in some way for a quarter of the year, that what is the main, outside of people who are actually physically ill because of Corona, what is the main thing people were most upset about? Not being able to get the hair done, nails, all of these things that are comforts. And so I'm just bringing up that we are attached to comforts before we are attached to the value systems that we say we're invested in. Right. So I'm just talking about, how do we start to strike that balance?
Right.
You know,
I think it's also a conversation about like, what are we willing to give up? I think about the civil rights movement in terms of why it was so successful. Folks walked miles to work and refused to get on the bus. So in terms of Jillian, you talking about comfort, like what are we willing to give up? Are folks willing to stop giving Beso money so they can get items from Amazon in a couple days when he is not doing right by people in general, whether we're talking about Black, brown, LGBTQ+, he does not care about people, and it's profit over people for him. So are folks willing to disinvest in Amazon, in Walmart? And like you said, Araya, a lot of it too has to do with accessibility. If you are living in a rural area, is it accessible for folks to be able to think about alternative options? Like we have a co-op here in Ithaca in terms of organic, eco-friendly foods, but Black and brown people here are underemployed, so they don't even have accessibility to those options to disinvest in the Walmart or disinvest in Wegmans. So all of these forms of oppression are so intertwined and it's so big intentionally that it's hard to figure out where to focus all of your energy because everything's coming at you at one time.
Yeah, I want to call out something one of our participants shared in the Q&A. I believe the name is Deneen Garrett. This person says, check out the Blackout Coalition, the Blackest Blackout, and the Shopping Mall Facebook groups. Hashtag Blackout Day 2020 is July 7th, and the call is to only spend with Black businesses or not at all. So for folks who are interested in learning more about that and engaging in that, there's an outlet. I've been seeing a lot of that across Facebook and LinkedIn, where we're making lists of Black-owned businesses and encouraging Black banks and encouraging Black people to shop and be there. There's another question that came up, and this is going to be pretty particular to folks who live in Ithaca or who have lived in Ithaca and know something about Ithaca. Kathleen says, as a white person in a rural area who sees other white people sharing videos of Black public figures serving as a talking head against movements like Black Lives Matter, institutional racism, etc. And Kathleen says, I think everyone knows who I'm talking about. What are your thoughts on those individuals and ways to counter that rhetoric? So you got Black people who are being used to talk against the movement and the way in which we are engaging in our movement. How do you go against that? How do you begin to call them out? And I think
this is a white person asking how to call,
and I think
don't.
So I hear you saying, Candace, like, that's your job.
Are they talking about Candace Owens or something?
No. So this is a very particular public figure in Ithaca, New York. Right. I'm not going to say that person's name, but I think Nicole and Candace, you should know what I'm talking about.
I'm not following.
Could you?
So we're going to say, let's just put it out there. His name is Mayor Savante Myrick. I'm sure that's who we're talking about.
Okay.
Right. Who I'm assuming, and Kathleen, please correct me in the Q&A. But just in general, there's a lot.
I guess some of my immediate thoughts would be like not even thinking about Savante specifically. I think we have to dismantle this notion that if you put a Black or brown person in a position of power, everything else is going to fall into place. If I'm thinking about Dr. Brown, who's the superintendent of the Ithaca City School District, even though he is a Black man in charge, all of his employees, for the most part, are white. So we can't expect the system to change just because one Black person is in charge of mostly white racist folks. And we saw that with the Academy in terms of the Oscars being so white. Just because the person in charge is now a Black woman does not change the fact that the Academy who votes is made up of mostly white upper class males. So we have to infiltrate the entire structure and not just the face of an organization, because that person, though they're in charge, they're the face of the organization. And with Savante specifically, I think it's also important to understand that Black people in positions of power are always walking a tricky line in terms of assimilation, as Jillian talked about, in terms of upholding some form of the status quo while also trying to dismantle it, while also trying to fool white folks that they're not really trying to fuck shit up, but they are. So Black folks are like, I don't know if I can really trust you. White people are like, yay, I voted for a Black man. And everybody else is just like, I'm not sure what really has fucking changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing that in many places. You got it with, even though Candace Owens is not, she's not with the Black Lives Matter movement, but, definitely talks against, sort of the issues that Black folks choose. And I promised myself I was not going to say her name, but but I did anyway. But, I think that becomes another issue too, when you have these Black folks who are speaking out against our movements and therefore giving more power to the white folks who agree with what they're saying and actually go against everything that we're working towards. And I love what you said, Nicole. It's like, that's not really the move of putting Black folks into power and thinking that it's going to change simply because they're there. That didn't happen with Obama. Everybody thought that, racism is going to be over. Even Black people thought that racism was going to be over when Obama came to the office. It's like, no, that did not happen. It is not over, and it wasn't going to happen in the first place. Because in my opinion, it is not one Black person's job to change it. Every last one of us have to be a part. I always tell people, y'all keep looking for this one leader, and the leader ain't showing up because it's already here. Look in the mirror. You are the person you've been waiting for to arrive to institute change. I want to be mindful that we have 8 minutes left. One of the things I like to always end with is where do we go from here? What do we do from here? What do we as Black folks do when we're thinking about how we show up for Black trans people, Black queer people, things of that sort? What do white folks do? Like, what do we absolutely unequivocally need from white folks to either stop doing or to start doing after they've watched this particular webinar? And I know that could be a whole nother 2-hour conversation, but what are those action steps? Let's give people homework.
Well, one thing, stop it with the sorry I'm late, like type of thing, because it's more like you're sorry because you're late, and know that that's on you and that's a you thing. Stop putting the need of education on Black shoulders. Realize what I've been using for the past 2 weeks is that when you look at privilege, like it's a wall and it's a door in that wall, but the lock is always on the side of the person who is more privileged. I cannot do anything whatsoever to open that door for you. You have to open it yourself, and so I think, Candace, you were talking about don't call me, don't ask me, use Google, do your own research, be a regular person and human, and just find out what needs to be done, because we've been saying it since the 1700s. So, do your damn research and then get back to me.
You ready? Other folks?
I would also say, and this is just specifically for white people, like, stop making excuses. As I said, there are just certain conversations that I'm just not going to engage in anymore, because if you enter into conversations just ready to tell me that my reality isn't real, that my experiences are fake, that I'm somehow making something more than what it is. If you're entering into a situation just to continue to affirm white superiority, there's just no place for that. So there's educating yourself, and then when you're feeling uncomfortable or you're being met with things that you've never been met before, like, the excuses are just null and void. Like, those are just not even something that can be on the table the table anymore. And I also feel like that also goes for Black people in terms of, I just think we have to cease with the compromising. Like, I think there has been, again, assimilation. I didn't even realize how much assimilation was my theme in this, but apparently it is. We just have to cease trying to navigate with people and institutions that would rather see us dead than anything else, that would rather, throw us off the bus than lose money, or whatever the case may be. So it's like, I think we also need to be empowered to understand that we don't have to negotiate our humanity, that our livelihood is not a luxury, it's a right. And so I think that this idea that we have to come to the table and figure out a way where everything works for everyone, no, that's actually not how that works. Some things are just wrong. Some people are just wrong. And we have to start approaching the conversations, not hoping that everybody's going to walk away happy, but everybody's sitting at the table and telling the truth.
Absolutely.
So,
one of the things I'm always frustrated to hear, and I've started to clap back on a lot, is well, what about the other side of the argument? There is no other side of the argument. There's just no.
Nothing's happening to you.
There's one argument. And anti-blackness, all that shit needs to be done. There's no other argument. That's it. That is the tweet. That's it. Other folks, Candace, Gabby, Nicole, what are your thoughts?
Well, I prepared a list.
Go ahead.
This is my favorite question.
I know it would be. Go ahead.
I'm a Virgo. Pay Black women, especially Black trans women, run your pockets. Just and pay us directly. You know, we know what our community needs. We know what we need as people. You can hop on Instagram. There are tons of collectives doing mutual fund, like mutual community funds. Just hop on. Just search a couple of hashtags. Venmo, great. 2, listen, don't add. 3, if you find yourself about to say something or write an email where you ask a Black person to work for free, stop. Look at yourself. Part of the problem. 4, your feelings are gonna get hurt. Accept that, and do the work to work through that. But process those feelings with other white people. Leave us out of that. Like we are no.
Unless you're paying me. If you want to pay me my hourly rate to help
right.
me.
Yes.
As Araya said, you can pay me and I will sit with you.
Yes.
But the rate will increase. Yes. Double that rate.
Double that rate. And also, once you find yourself processing those things, then go out and talk to other white folks. I think the consensus has been, Black folks did not create this system of oppression. We do not benefit from this system. Y'all do, so y'all have to do the dismantling work, and y'all have to have the hard conversations. So lean into that. And the last was just do better. That's my list.
Some final thoughts in our 2 minutes. Anything you want to leave the people with?
So I have a PowerPoint to follow up with Candace's notes. I don't know if we have time for all that, but just very quickly, a couple of things. Stand in unapologetic solidarity. Don't be afraid to take risks. Like, again, to your point, Candace, you're gonna get your feelings hurt. This isn't a time to feel comfortable. We've gone through decades and decades of this. For Black people, we're living in an echo chamber where we're constantly having the same conversations with each other over and over again. It's exhausting, and there hasn't been the kind of action or movement that we need to uplift our voices and to move us forward. And then I think the other thing is just being proactive, not reactive to certain conditions. Stop making it a hashtag. It's not enough just to change your profile picture or to send out a statement. We actually need to see tangible changes within your organization, from recruiting, from retention, from the people on your boards. Like, we need you to stop putting essentially the burden on just folks of color that are trying to do their day jobs, and also like navigating the trauma that they're faced with, right, to get through the day. So I think that those would be some of the highlights, Cornell, but in general, I would just want everyone, as a key takeaway, allyship doesn't end after your Diversity 101 training. This is a lifetime commitment to the work and to the movement.
To action. I always tell people when they ask me, well, Cornell, what can I do? Well, are you ready to lose friends? Are you ready to lose family? Are you ready to maybe even lose your job? If you're not, then you're not ready to be an ally yet, because this is what happens to us when we dare to step into our truth. I also want to acknowledge myself in saying that, like, as a Black cisgendered man, I've got work to do on my own privileges and understanding how I show up in spaces as well. And so I'm not just here to tell other folks that what y'all got to, like, I have a lot of shit that I have to unpack and begin to think about ways in which my privilege has benefited me and how I've been a part of systemic oppression for other folks. So
I forgot to tell Black people as well, you're doing to trans people the same thing that white people are doing to us.
Absolutely. With that said, I want to thank you so much for being with me for this hour and all the nuggets and mic drops that y'all have provided. I know we could have gone on and on and on and on this, but I really, really thank you for your time. And I want to thank our participants for being here with us and for taking the time to listen and ask questions. I do want to give another special shout out to Dr. Brandon Barilli, who helped pay for the closed captioning that I'm hoping worked this time. You can find him on Instagram at Dr. Brandon Barilli and at Queerly Empowered, and find him and follow him and find his store. But also follow these individuals here on your screen right now. They are amazing. They are doing the work. And I just can't say thank you enough for your energy and your amazingness. So thank you and have a great rest of your week.